The evening had been perfect. Or, at least, that's how I had always imagined it would be. My wife, Emily, and I sat on the couch in our living room, the soft glow of the television screen flickering across our faces as we shared another one of our Friday night rituals. The routine was comfortable, predictable, and safe. It had been like this for the past 5 years of our marriage. Wine, a movie, and the warmth of being together in the silence of the night. I'd always loved the simplicity of it. Just the two of us, in our little world, sharing moments that didn't need to be extraordinary to be perfect. But tonight, something felt different. It wasn't something I could immediately place, but I could feel it in the air between us, heavy and unspoken. We had just finished watching a rom-com, one of those movies that was supposed to make you feel good about love, the kind of movie where the happy couple gets their happily ever after an hour and a half of predictable drama. But instead of the usual light-hearted conversation that followed, Emily sat still for a moment, her gaze lingering on the screen even after the credits had rolled. There was a quiet distance in her eyes, a coldness that hadn't been there before. I tried to shrug it off, telling myself it was nothing. Maybe she was tired, maybe the movie had stirred up emotions I didn't fully understand. I grabbed the remote and turned off the TV, the sudden silence in the room pressing down on me like a weight. Then, without warning, she turned to me. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a spark in her eyes, something that caught me off guard. She studied me for a long moment, her lips slightly parted, as though weighing her words carefully. "So," she began, her voice soft but steady, "this Friday, I'm going to spend the night with someone else." I froze. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, their weight sinking deep into my chest. I had to have heard her wrong. My heart raced, and my mind scrambled for a rational explanation, something that could make sense of what she just said. "What?" My voice cracked, betraying the shock that surged through me. Emily leaned back, her eyes never leaving mine, and for the first time in what felt like years, I saw something in her expression that I didn't recognize. It wasn't warmth, it wasn't love. It was something else, something unfamiliar and dangerous. "I'm going to spend the night with someone else," she repeated, this time with a hint of finality. "I've been thinking about it for a while now, and I need to do it." I opened my mouth to speak, to ask her to clarify, to beg her for an explanation, but the words wouldn't come. I could only stare at her, disbelief painted on my face. "Why?" The question escaped me, barely more than a whisper. She sighed, a breath full of something I couldn't quite understand. It wasn't frustration or anger. It was resignation, like she had already made up her mind and was simply telling me because she felt it was the right thing to do. "It's not about you," she said, her tone soft, as if she were trying to soothe me. "It's just something I've been thinking about for a while. I need this, I think." I shook my head, my mind reeling. "But why? What's going on? Why would you want to do this?" "I don't know," she said, her voice quieter now, tinged with an edge of vulnerability I had never heard before. "It's just something I need to explore. I love you, but I've been feeling like I need to find something outside of us, outside of this. I can't explain it, but I need to see where it goes." The words hung in the air, their weight settling between us, thick and suffocating. I wanted to ask her what had led to this, why she felt the need to look outside our marriage. Was I not enough? Had I missed something? Had I been so consumed with the monotony of our life that I hadn't seen the cracks forming? But all I could do was sit there, my mind struggling to catch up with what she was saying. I knew she was being honest, in her own way, but it didn't make it any easier to hear. She didn't seem to be waiting for my response. Instead, she sat up straighter, almost as though she were preparing herself to leave. "I'll be back the next day," she added, a soft smile curving her lips. "But I want you to understand, this is something I need to do for me." I blinked, trying to process everything she had just said. "And you're telling me this now?" She looked at me, her gaze unwavering. "Yes," she said simply. "I want you to know because I need you to understand. This isn't a betrayal, not in the way you might think. It's just something I need to figure out. I wanted to scream, to shout, to demand answers. But all I could do was sit there, feeling the distance between us grow with every passing second. I had spent years building a life with her, a life I thought was perfect, a life I thought we both wanted. But now, it was as if the rug had been pulled out from under me, leaving me scrambling for some kind of footing in a world I didn't recognize. Emily stood up slowly, brushing a strand of hair out of her face. "I'll be ready in a bit," she said, her voice soft, as though this was just another routine. "You don't have to wait up for me." With that, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving me sitting there in the heavy silence. I didn't know what to feel, or even what to think. My heart ached, my mind raced, and yet, deep down, I couldn't shake the sense that something had shifted irrevocably between us. This was more than just an unusual request. It felt like a turning point, like the beginning of something I wasn't sure I was ready for. Was I willing to let her go? Could I understand what she needed from this? And most importantly, could I live with the consequences of what was about to happen? I had no answers. All I had was a sense of dread, the kind that gnawed at the edges of my consciousness, pulling me deeper into a spiral I wasn't sure I could escape. As I sat there, staring into the empty space she had just occupied, I couldn't help but wonder if this was the end of something. Or if it was just the beginning of a whole new chapter in our lives, one that would push us both into uncharted territory. One thing was certain, things would never be the same again. The days that followed were nothing short of torturous. Each one felt like an eternity, stretching out before me in a blur of confusion, disbelief, and pain. Emily's words, still echoing in my mind, had transformed our home into something foreign, a place where the warmth we once shared now felt distant and cold. The silence between us grew, an oppressive presence that weighed heavily in the air. The usual comfort of being together had vanished, replaced by an almost unbearable tension. I watched her go about her daily routine as if nothing had changed, her demeanor so casual, so indifferent to the storm she had set in motion. She was preparing herself for something, and yet all I could do was stand by, helpless, as if I had no say in the matter. I kept telling myself I needed to talk to her, to demand answers, to understand why she had made this decision, but every time I tried, the words wouldn't come. It felt like I was choking on them, afraid of what she might say, or worse, afraid that I already knew the truth. That this wasn't just some phase, some fleeting desire she needed to explore, but a sign of something far deeper, something that I couldn't fix. When Friday finally arrived, I found myself dreading it. I had known it was coming, of course, but knowing didn't make it any easier. I had spent the past few days trying to prepare myself for her absence, to come to terms with what she had said, but now, with the day here, I found myself paralyzed by a mix of emotions that I couldn't untangle. As I walked through the house, aimlessly pacing from room to room, I couldn't help but feel like a stranger in my own home. I had grown used to Emily being the center of my world, the anchor that held everything together. But now there was only a hollow space where that certainty used to be. I tried to distract myself. Work, friends, even cleaning the house. Nothing could fill the void that had opened up inside me. I found myself thinking back to the beginning of our relationship, to those first months when everything felt new and exciting. We had built a life together, or at least, I thought we had. But now, I couldn't help but question everything. What had gone wrong? What had I missed? Was this just a passing phase for her, or had I become the very thing she no longer wanted? That evening, as the sun began to set and the house grew darker, I sat down at the kitchen table, my thoughts spinning out of control. The phone on the table buzzed, a reminder of an email I'd forgotten to check. It was from work, but it felt like an insignificant detail in the grand scheme of things. My mind was elsewhere. At some point, Emily appeared in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the soft light from the hallway. I looked up at her, and for the first time, I saw her as a stranger. Her presence no longer felt comforting or familiar. There was a distance between us now, one that no words could bridge. She stood there for a moment, her eyes scanning the room before she spoke. "I'm going to go now," she said, her voice flat, almost too composed. It was as though she was telling me she was about to go out for a casual errand, not leave to spend the night with another person. "Okay," I replied, the words slipping out of my mouth before I could stop it. There was nothing else to say. I wanted to ask her what she was thinking, what she was feeling, but the question felt hollow, meaningless. I wanted to demand the truth, to understand why she was making this decision, but I knew the answer wouldn't make it any easier. I was afraid that once the truth was out, it would only confirm my worst fears. She walked past me, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the silence of the house. I didn't turn to watch her go, though part of me wanted to. Instead, I sat there, motionless, as the door clicked shut behind her. The quiet that followed was deafening. I don't know how long I sat there, but when I finally stood up, I was overwhelmed with an intense sense of loss. It wasn't just the loss of her presence, it was the loss of everything we had built, everything I had thought we were. The very foundation of our marriage seemed to be crumbling beneath me, and I didn't know how to stop it. I tried to focus on something, anything, to distract myself from the whirlwind of emotions that threatened to consume me. I grabbed my phone, scrolling mindlessly through social media, but the images of happy couples, families, and friends only served to make me feel more isolated. Everyone else seemed to have their lives together, while I was left to pick up the pieces of my broken marriage. A part of me wondered if I should go after her, to follow her, confront her, demand some kind of explanation. But then, I wondered if it would even matter. What could I say? What could I do? She had already made up her mind, and I was just a spectator, powerless to change the course of events. The night dragged on, each minute feeling like an eternity. The house, once filled with the sounds of our laughter and conversations, now felt like an empty shell. I walked through the rooms, unable to find peace in any of them. I kept thinking about her, imagining where she was, what she was doing. Was she with someone else? Was she already wrapped in someone's arms, sharing a kind of intimacy I could never give her? The questions ate away at me, gnawing at the edges of my sanity. I wanted to believe that this was all just some temporary lapse in judgment, that Emily would return and everything would be fine. But deep down I knew better. This wasn't something that could be undone. Whatever happened tonight, things would be different when she came back. It wasn't just the physical act of her leaving, of her spending the night with someone else. It was everything that led up to this moment, the distance, the disconnection, the emotions left unspoken. This was the culmination of everything I had ignored, every sign I had failed to see. As the hours stretched on, I finally made my way to bed, but sleep eluded me. My mind kept racing, and the feeling of emptiness in the room only grew stronger. I had no idea what the future held, or if there was even a future left for us. But one thing was certain, Emily was changing, and so was I. And neither of us might ever be the same again. The night dragged on without a word, the silence stretching between us like an endless chasm. Every minute felt like an eternity, and yet I could not bring myself to leave the house, to go anywhere or do anything that might distract me from the weight of what had happened. My mind was stuck in a loop of anger, confusion, and fear. Emily was out there, somewhere, with someone else, and I was powerless to stop it. When I finally drifted off to sleep, it wasn't the relief of rest that came. It was the restless stirring of nightmares, dreams where I saw her laughing with another man, holding hands, sharing moments that once belonged to only us. The images flickered and warped in my mind, each one more painful than the last. I woke up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, heart pounding in my chest. I stared at the ceiling, trying to breathe through the panic that was slowly consuming me. It felt as if my whole world had been turned upside down, as if everything I had believed in had just crumbled away in an instant. When I looked at the clock, I realized it was almost dawn. The first light of morning had begun to filter in through the curtains, casting long shadows across the room. But Emily was still not home. A strange part of me had hoped she would return before morning, that she would come back, apologetic, with some kind of explanation. But the longer I waited, the more it seemed unlikely. I couldn't just stay in bed anymore. I threw the covers off and sat up, the cold air of the room biting at my skin. I walked to the kitchen, my movements slow and mechanical, like a man trapped in a dream he couldn't wake up from. The coffee maker was still on, the faint smell of stale coffee lingering in the air. I poured myself a cup, hoping the caffeine would help clear my mind, but nothing seemed to help. My thoughts kept circling back to her, to the look in her eyes when she told me about her plans for that night. The certainty in her voice. It was like she had already made peace with what she was doing, like she had already detached from me in some way that I hadn't noticed until now. I took a sip of the coffee, the bitterness doing nothing to quell the pit in my stomach. Every second without her felt unbearable, like the walls of the house were closing in on me. Finally, as the morning wore on and the sun climbed higher in the sky, I heard the sound of the front door opening. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. My breath caught in my throat as I stood there, listening to the familiar sound of Emily's footsteps echoing through the hallway. She was back. I didn't know what I expected, but the moment she walked into the kitchen, I was hit with a wave of emotions that I could hardly process. My first instinct was to demand answers, to ask her where she had been, who she had been with. But the look on her face stopped me. She was different. She didn't look the same. Her eyes were distant, almost as if she had crossed over some invisible line that neither of us could return from. She glanced at me, but there was no warmth in her gaze. There was no apology, no trace of the woman I had married. It was as if the person I had known was no longer standing in front of me. Instead, there was a stranger, someone who had made her peace with the choices she had made. "I'm home," Emily said, her voice flat, almost mechanical. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and oppressive, and yet, I couldn't bring myself to speak. There were too many things I wanted to say, too many questions I wanted to ask. But the words wouldn't come. I just stood there, my heart racing, caught in a whirlwind of emotions. She reached for the coffee pot, her movements slow and deliberate. I watched her, my mind spinning with the possibilities. Had she gone to him? Had she been with someone else all night, just as she said she would? I could feel the jealousy rising inside me, the sharp edge of betrayal cutting through the haze of uncertainty. "You didn't come back last night," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The words tasted bitter on my tongue. "I told you I wouldn't," she replied, her gaze still fixed on the coffee pot, her back turned to me. She didn't seem to care, or perhaps she just didn't know how to care anymore. I felt the sting of her indifference like a slap to the face. It wasn't just that she had spent the night with someone else. It was the way she spoke about it, as if it was no more significant than picking up groceries or doing laundry. There was no remorse, no hesitation. She had made her choice, and she had no intention of turning back. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Who was it?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Who were you with?" There was a long pause before she answered. I could feel her hesitation, but it didn't seem to matter. She didn't look at me. She didn't offer an explanation. "It doesn't matter," she said softly. "It was someone I needed. Someone who understood me in ways you don't." Her words hit me like a punch. They were cold, final, and completely devoid of emotion. I had no idea who she was talking about, but the words didn't matter. The truth was clear. She had already chosen this path, and she wasn't looking back. And neither was I. I turned away, unable to face her any longer. The room felt suffocating, the walls closing in around me. I didn't want to hear any more. I didn't want to know who it was, or what had happened. All I wanted was for this nightmare to end, for Emily to come back to me, to tell me that everything would be okay. But I knew that wasn't going to happen. The distance between us had grown too wide, and there was no bridge strong enough to bring us back. "I'm going to leave for a while," I said, my voice barely audible. I can't do this right now. I didn't wait for a response. I grabbed my keys and walked out of the kitchen, out of the house, and into the unknown. The air outside was cold, biting against my skin, but I didn't care. I needed to be away from her, away from the pain she had caused me. I needed to think, to find a way to make sense of everything that had happened. As I walked through the streets, my mind was racing. I had no idea what to do next. The marriage I had built, the life I had thought we were going to share, had been shattered in an instant. I was left with nothing but the echo of her words and the silence that followed. I had to figure out what to do next. But in that moment, I felt more lost than I had ever felt in my life. You said. The days that followed were a blur of numbness and exhaustion. I drifted through life in a fog, as if I were merely existing rather than truly living. Work became an escape of sorts, though even that was laced with a sense of detachment. I couldn't focus. My thoughts were constantly on Emily, on what had happened, on the destruction of everything I had once believed was solid. But no matter how much I tried, I couldn't make sense of it. I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that the woman I loved, the woman I had built my entire life with, had chosen to walk away from everything for something else. She hadn't returned my calls, hadn't offered any explanation. The few messages I had sent were left unanswered. It was like she had completely shut me out, as if I no longer mattered in her world. But the silence between us felt more deafening than anything she could have said. I spent hours replaying our life together, the small details, the moments we had shared. Every laugh, every argument, every touch, all of it felt like it had been part of some cruel illusion. Had it ever been real? Had we ever been truly happy? Or had I been too blinded by my own love to see the cracks forming beneath the surface? Eventually, the emptiness of our home became unbearable. It no longer felt like a place of comfort, but a prison that held nothing but memories. I packed a bag and left, not really knowing where I was going, but knowing I couldn't stay there any longer. The weight of everything hung heavy on my shoulders as I made my way to the city. It was late when I arrived, the streets empty and dimly lit, and yet there was something strangely calming about it. I needed to be alone, to clear my mind. I found myself walking aimlessly through the streets, not sure what I was searching for but hoping that some semblance of peace would find me. As I walked, I began to notice things I had never seen before. The world seemed sharper, clearer, like a veil had been lifted from my eyes. I watched couples passing by, their hands intertwined, laughing softly together. I could feel the pang of longing in my chest, a longing for something I no longer had. It was when I turned a corner, lost in my thoughts, that I saw him. He was sitting at a cafe, alone, staring down at the table in front of him. His features were sharp, his jawline clenched as if he were deep in thought. His presence was commanding, almost magnetic. He looked familiar, but I couldn't place him. Something about the way he carried himself made me uneasy. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible feeling, but I knew in that moment that this man had something to do with Emily. I stopped, my heart hammering in my chest. I didn't want to make my presence known, didn't want to confront him. But there was a part of me that was desperate for answers, that needed to know who he was. My gaze lingered on him for a moment longer, my breath catching in my throat, before I turned and walked quickly away. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he was important. That somehow, he was a part of Emily's world now, the world she had chosen over me. I spent the rest of the night wandering the city, unable to focus on anything except the images of that man. Who was he? Was he the one Emily had been with the night she left? The one she had mentioned so casually? I couldn't help but imagine their interactions, their closeness, their intimacy. The thought was unbearable, but it gnawed at me relentlessly, feeding into my growing jealousy and pain. By the time I made my way back to the hotel I had checked into, the exhaustion from my wandering had caught up with me. I collapsed onto the bed, my mind still racing, unable to escape the turmoil. I could feel my heart beating wildly, as if it, too, was trying to escape the suffocating feeling in my chest. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, saw him. I couldn't stop thinking about them together. And every time I tried to tell myself that it didn't matter, that I needed to move on, a part of me screamed in defiance. I wasn't ready to let go of her. I couldn't be. The next morning, the emptiness was still there. But now it was different. Now, there was something more pressing in my mind, something I couldn't ignore. I needed to find out more about the man I had seen the night before. I needed to know who he was, what he meant to her, and what role he had played in her decision to leave. There was no denying it now. The truth was out there, and I had to face it. As much as I wanted to pretend that I could move on, that I could leave the past behind and start over, the truth kept pulling me back in. I had to confront the reality of what had happened, and that meant finding out everything I could. I spent the day searching for answers. I scoured social media, looking for any clues that might lead me to him. It wasn't long before I found a photograph, a candid shot of Emily and the man sitting together at a cafe. They were smiling, laughing, their faces lit up by the soft glow of the setting sun. They looked happy. And for the first time, it hit me like a ton of bricks. She wasn't just casually seeing him. She was emotionally involved with him. This was serious. I stared at the photo for what felt like hours, my heart sinking lower and lower with each passing second. The man in the picture had an air of confidence about him, an undeniable magnetism. There was no denying the chemistry between them. The look on Emily's face said it all. She was no longer the woman I knew. She had changed. I could feel my anger building, but it wasn't just anger at her. It was anger at myself, too. How had I not seen this coming? How had I failed to notice the signs, the subtle shifts in her behavior, the little things that might have pointed to the truth? But what could I do now? What was the point of all this digging? The truth was out there, but it didn't change anything. She had made her choice. She had moved on. And I was still here, lost in a sea of confusion and pain, grasping at any shred of hope that I could make sense of what had happened. The answer, I realized, was simple. There was no going back. Whatever we had was gone. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't bring it back. The only thing left for me now was to find a way to move forward. Even if that meant letting her go. The next few days felt like a blur of emotions, a constant roller coaster that never seemed to stop. I couldn't shake the image of Emily and the man, their smiles so genuine, their connection so undeniable. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together. It didn't matter how hard I tried to distract myself, to focus on work or other meaningless distractions, my thoughts always came back to her. To them. I knew I couldn't go on like this. I needed to confront her, to face the truth head-on. I couldn't keep drowning in this sea of confusion. I needed closure, even if it meant hearing something that would break me further. The only way to truly heal was to understand exactly what had happened, to hear it from her own lips. But a part of me still clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a way to fix things. That if I confronted her, if I made her see the pain she had caused, she might realize her mistake and come back to me. It was a naive hope, I knew, but in the depths of my heartbreak, it was all I had left. I called her, finally. It was late afternoon, and the silence in the house was suffocating. I sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the phone in my hand, willing myself to make the call. I knew that after this, there would be no turning back. Whatever happened next would shape the future of my life, one way or another. The phone rang for a few seconds before it picked up. My heart raced as I held my breath. "Hello?" Her voice was distant, almost cold. It sent a chill down my spine. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. "We need to talk." There was a long pause on the other end. Then, a soft sigh. "I know. I've been avoiding it. I guess we both knew this moment would come eventually." Her words stung more than I expected. It was as if she had already made peace with everything, as if she had already decided what was going to happen and was simply waiting for me to catch up. Where are you? I asked, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to remain composed. I'm at a friend's house, she replied, not offering any further explanation. She sounded like she was holding back, like there was something more she wanted to say but didn't know how to. Can you come home? I asked, the question escaping before I could stop it. I need to see you. We need to talk face to face. I don't think that's a good idea right now, she replied, her voice tinged with uncertainty. I don't think I can do this in person. Her words hit me like a physical blow. She was already distancing herself from me, preparing to end things without any real effort to salvage what we had. It wasn't just the affair, it was everything she had been hiding from me for so long. I had been a fool to think I could still fix things. She had made her decision, and I was left standing in the ruins of everything we had built together. But I couldn't give up without knowing the truth. Emily, please. I need to understand. I need to know what happened. Why him? There was a pause on the other end of the line, and when she spoke again, her voice was soft, almost apologetic. It's not just about him. It's about me too. I've been feeling lost for a long time. I didn't know how to fix myself, and I thought, maybe this would help. Maybe I could feel something again, something real. I felt a cold wave of realization wash over me. She wasn't just cheating. She wasn't just looking for something outside of our relationship. She was trying to find herself, to escape the person she had become in our marriage. The thought made me sick. It wasn't just a betrayal of trust. It was a betrayal of everything we had worked for, everything I had thought we meant to each other. Is that all this is to you? Just a way to find yourself? I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. There was another long pause before she responded. No, it's more than that. But I don't know how to explain it to you. I've changed, and I don't know if I can come back from that. I closed my eyes, trying to hold it together. The weight of her words pressed down on me, suffocating me. So, this is it? You've made your decision. I think so, she replied softly, almost as if she were trying to convince herself. I never meant for it to hurt you, but I don't think we can keep going like this. I don't think we're the same people anymore. I felt the crushing weight of finality in her words. There was no anger, no bitterness in her tone, just a quiet resignation. It was as if she had already mourned the loss of our marriage, and I was just the last person to catch up with her. The silence stretched on, and I didn't know what to say. What could I say? She had already made her choice, and nothing I said could change that. Emily, I started, my voice breaking. Do you love him? She didn't answer right away, and I felt a knot tighten in my chest. When she finally spoke, her words were hesitant, uncertain. I don't know. I don't know what love is anymore. Maybe I just need to figure that out first. The ache in my chest deepened. She didn't love me anymore, and she didn't know if she loved him. She didn't know anything. She had been lost in her own confusion for so long that she had forgotten what it meant to love, to be loved. I never wanted this, I said, my voice shaking with the weight of everything I was feeling. I never wanted to lose you. I know, she replied softly. I didn't want to hurt you. But I think we've both been hurting for a long time. I just didn't know how to fix it. I wanted to scream, to tell her how much she had destroyed me, how much she had shattered everything I had believed in. But I couldn't. Instead, I just whispered, I don't know what to do now. You'll figure it out, she said, her voice distant, almost too calm. You're strong. You always were. The words felt hollow, empty. There was no warmth behind them, no reassurance. She had already let go of me, and now it was my turn to catch up. I guess this is goodbye then, I said, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. There was a long silence before she spoke again, her voice barely audible. Goodbye, your name. I'm sorry. And then, just like that, the line went dead. I stared at the phone in my hand for what felt like an eternity, unable to process the finality of what had just happened. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built my entire future with, was gone. And she wasn't coming back. I set the phone down slowly and closed my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. I wasn't sure what came next. I wasn't sure how to even begin to rebuild the shattered pieces of my life. But one thing was clear. I was done chasing after someone who had already left me behind. It was time to let go. The weeks that followed felt like I was crawling out of a fog that had wrapped itself around me the moment Emily left. At first, everything was overwhelming. The house, once filled with laughter, now stood in silence, like a tombstone marking the end of something I had held dear for so long. The void she had left was palpable, a constant reminder of everything that had been lost. I spent the first few days after the call in a daze, unsure of how to function without her. It wasn't just the absence of her presence in the house. It was the absence of her in my life. We had built everything together, from our careers to our dreams, and now it all felt like dust. I had been part of her world for so long, I didn't know who I was without her. She had been my constant, my foundation, and now I was standing on shaky ground, trying to rebuild. But slowly, things started to shift. The numbness that had initially taken over began to fade, replaced by a sharpness that had been dulled over years of complacency. I realized I had let myself become so enmeshed in our life that I had lost touch with who I was. It wasn't just Emily who had changed. I had too. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped living for myself and had begun living for her, for us, for a future I thought we were both building together. I started with small things. I began exercising again, something I had stopped doing when life got busy. I reconnected with friends I had neglected. I focused on work with renewed determination. It felt good to rediscover these parts of myself, parts one had long since abandoned. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't defined by my relationship, by the pain I had endured. I was beginning to be defined by who I was as an individual again. There were moments, of course, where the pain would resurface. Late at night, I would wake up and feel the emptiness beside me. I would reach for her side of the bed, only to find it cold, unoccupied. The ache in my chest would return, and I would feel like I was suffocating under the weight of it all. But slowly, I began to accept the reality. It wasn't easy. In fact, it was excruciating, but I knew it was necessary. I couldn't keep holding on to someone who had already let go. I had to free myself, even if it meant facing the unknown alone. I kept thinking about Emily, about the man she had chosen. The man who had become the catalyst for all of this. But instead of feeling jealousy or anger, I began to feel something else, indifference. It was liberating. I realized that whatever they had, whatever it was that drew her to him, didn't matter. I had been a part of her life, yes, but she was no longer part of mine. And I had to come to terms with that. In the midst of my healing process, I found a strange sense of empowerment. The more I focused on myself, the less her absence affected me. It was like a weight was being lifted off my shoulders, one piece at a time. I started to believe that I could move forward, that I could be happy again, not because of her, but because of who I was. But there was still something unresolved. I had always prided myself on being honest, on confronting the truth, no matter how painful. And I knew that, in order to truly let go, I needed to have one final conversation with Emily. It wasn't for closure, per se. I had already closed that chapter in my mind, but for peace. I needed to hear her side of things one last time. I needed to hear her acknowledge the pain she had caused, not because I wanted an apology, but because I needed to know that she understood the weight of her actions. I contacted her. It was strange, considering how much time had passed since we last spoke, but I knew I couldn't move on without facing her once more. She agreed to meet, and we arranged to meet at a cafe, a neutral place where the tension wouldn't be as suffocating. The day we met, I felt a mixture of nerves and anticipation. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew I wasn't going to let her off easy. I had spent too much time in the dark, too much time trying to piece together what had happened between us. I wanted clarity, even if it meant confronting the painful truth. When she walked into the cafe, I felt a wave of recognition. She still looked the same, her eyes still carrying that spark of life that had once drawn me to her. But something was different. She seemed smaller somehow, diminished in a way I couldn't quite put my finger on. She sat down across from me, her hands folded neatly in front of her, and I could tell she was just as unsure about this conversation as I was. For a moment, neither of us spoke. It was like we were both trying to figure out how to bridge the gap that had formed between us, trying to find a way to connect again. "I don't know what to say," she finally said, her voice soft, almost hesitant. "I never wanted to hurt you. But I didn't know how to fix things. I was lost." "I know," I replied, my voice steady. "But why him, Emily? Why did you choose him over me? Over us?" She looked down, her fingers tracing the edge of her coffee cup. "I don't know. I thought I could find something with him that I couldn't find with you anymore. I thought I needed him, that he was the answer." "But he wasn't, was he?" I asked, my heart tightening. She shook her head slowly. "No, he wasn't. And I'm sorry. I thought I was doing what was best for me, but I see now that I was just running away from everything I had. From you. From myself." There was a long silence between us. I wasn't sure what to say. I had wanted answers, but the truth had only deepened the wound. There was nothing to fix anymore. The damage was done. "I think we both know it's over, don't we?" she said quietly. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Yeah. I think we do." We sat in silence for a while longer, both of us lost in our own thoughts. I wasn't sure if I would ever fully understand everything that had happened, but I realized then that I didn't need to. I didn't need to have all the answers. All I needed was to move on, to reclaim the pieces of myself that I had lost. And as painful as it was, that meant letting her go, truly and completely. When we parted ways that day, it was with no promises of reconciliation, no hopes of rekindling the past. It was just a quiet acceptance that we had both changed, that the people we had once been together could never exist again. And as I walked away, I felt something stir within me. It wasn't a sudden rush of joy or excitement, but a quiet strength. For the first time in months, I felt like I was truly free. The weight of the past was still there, but it no longer controlled me. I was ready to step forward, ready to rebuild. And maybe, just maybe, I would find something real again. Something better. Something for me.